I was so lucky because he's passed away now, but if I had one mentor or somebody that like really got me kind of, you can hear things from, five people and it can be the
Yeah.
same thing. And the sixth person tells you and for some reason, when he said something, I just could never pinpoint why, but it was much more intense, and
Gotcha.
he could say the same things. And so he gave me an opportunity. He actually seemed to get some enjoyment out of seeing the a little bit of me kind of wiggle in that executive role at that age. But he saw something in me and he gave me a chance. So
That's great. Isn't it nice to have, you know, I mean, I had a lot of bosses and supervisors and mentors, but like the mentors that I think about often or that I reflect on, like that's a smaller group, there's two or three that I'll always tell stories about, right? I mean, you usually have a bunch, but the group that you talk about or the group that you tell stories about, it's usually a smaller number. And there's a couple like that for me. That's a small number.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it
and,
is.
and quite frankly, just like you said, the one that I tell stories about the most was definitely not soft on me.
And Jim was always surprising me too. Like, I remember one night, it really stands out in my mind because after he passed away, I stayed we built hotels. I stayed at one of our hotels we had built, together. And I walked down the hall and something jumped out at me. It was like 2 in the morning that night. And remember, I'm the computer guy, okay? I, I have the whole hotel's responsibility of everything from wiring to computers, you name it. And there's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm tired
Yeah.
and we're ready to open. It's 2 a.m. and I'm passing Jim in the hallway of the unopened hotel. We're staying there at the hotel. It's just pre-opening. And he looks at me and he says, "Oh," he's like, "Adam," he's like, "Good, there you are." And I think he's going to talk to me about something. He's like, "Can you grab a vacuum cleaner and help me vacuum the lobby?" I'm like, I'm like, "Jim, it's 2 in the morning." I'm the computer guy. Like, yeah, but it's all hands on deck. And so he just taught me a lot about running a company and the realities of it, as opposed to you can read stuff, you can get lectured to, but
Yeah.
those moments, he was kind of the one that I really look back on in my career. And if I could kind of pick one person to kind of work with again, it definitely would be him. So
You just thought of something I'll rant about for a second. This is why I have a real hard time with consultants or quote career coaches that have actually never been in the C-level chair or never actually owned or started a company. But they're going to come be a consultant when they've never actually driven the bus. Now, I have a lot of consultant friends, so I don't want to make them all mad with this little rant. And there's, and I get the whole certification, the coach certification, and I have some coaches that are really good friends of mine. But until you have actually sat in the C chair and lived that stress and run a company or been a majority equity holder, until you've actually done it, you just don't know the true feeling. It's there's a stress level and an experience that's hard to describe if you've never actually lived it, in my opinion.
yeah, it's one of those things that I struggled with the most because no books
Yeah.
or education has prepared me for the reality of just how tough it is. Now, that in and of itself, I think defines the success or not of an entrepreneur, how tenacious you are and how much grit you have, because that's hard to learn on paper. And the day-to-day stresses. Jim was good at putting you in the fire, but making sure he was close enough to pull you out if there was something that got too much. But he wanted it to. You have to be you if you don't have some kind of equity or something to lose, then you can't have ever claimed that you ran a business, no matter how much of a startup owner you are. I mean, you have to feel like you're going to lose your house or your livelihood or maybe have to go lay on the street or something to really be fully invested in, I think, in entrepreneurship. If you haven't lived those moments, then it's not been a true run yet. So
Couldn't agree more. I had a guy tell me one time, he said, this is a perfect analogy, Steve. He said, look, he said, here's the deal. He said, if you haven't woken up for a couple of weeks straight, and the first thing you did was went to your window and looked out to see if your car's still there because you thought it was going to be repossessed. He's like, if you haven't done that, then you haven't really been an entrepreneur.
yeah, yeah. So I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, you do realize that I don't know how to do a lot of the challenges that come my way on a day-to-day basis, especially when you're an entrepreneur. You're like, wait a minute, I'm not an accountant, or so on and so
You
forth,
are now. You are now if you want to be a business
Exactly.
owner.
And so, and I tell people all the time, you have to be very comfortable with that fact. You won't know how to do things, and that's just part of being an entrepreneur. And you'll have to get good at finding out how to do that thing. Hence why that problem-solving kid in me probably did so well in business, because it's still that kid that's looking for that solution and won't quite stop that gets me through the day, like so.
You mentioned that word earlier, grit. I think you said grit. Yeah, scrappy and grit. Good, really good common sense. I mean, it's great to have an IEQ or a high IQ, but really these other things are so critical. I remember I got promoted to uh, an interim CEO position in '09, late '08, early '09, when everything was crashing. And it was a $40 million apparel company. And the entire leadership team had been whacked by the owners because the company was headed downhill. And I got promoted from like director of retail to being in charge of everything. And I had no fucking idea what I was doing. I was, I just was like, I can't remember coming home and telling my wife, I was like, well, the good news is I got a promotion and a raise. Bad news is I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I sure don't know if I can fix it. I remember walking into the CFO's office, who all of a sudden reported to me. Her name was Mary Beth, and she looks at me. She goes, "Hey, congratulations." She goes, I'm happy for you." She said, "By the way, here's our cash flow situation. If you don't find $1 million in about 3 weeks, we're going to miss payroll. So that's your first thing you need to figure out."
Yeah. And then welcome to, yeah,
Yeah,
welcome to
yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, I don't know how did we end up going down that road, but we
yeah.
could tell. So, you
What
back to your career. You started being an entrepreneur. How did how'd the hospitality thing happen? How did that connection happen?
That was so funny.
Yeah.
And I'll tie it into something else you said.
Okay.
One thing you mentioned is intelligence, and I think a lot of people will note about me being around me for maybe an hour. They'll be like, "That guy's," I don't know if they're putting me on a pedestal, but
No, pretty smart. Yeah.
yeah, they're thinking smart. Okay, so I think they think, hey, smart probably equals success in business.
Not
And,
yeah.
and actually, my greatest attribute is the Japanese saying of fall down 7 times, get up 8. I'm just good at getting up.